Okay, now we're good to go. So I am going to share my screen. And hang on, I've just got to admit somebody. Right, okay.
Sorry.
Oh,
Hold on a second.
can you see the screen okay?
Yes.
Hold on. There seems to be some kind of.
You're wanting to maybe, those of you who are not muted, maybe you could mute yourselves. That's Enza. And in the church, maybe you could mute yourselves. That's better. Right, are we ready to go? So, about a year or so ago, I was asked to make some vestments for your church. And your rector had actually already had a stole from me many years ago that he was given as a gift. And sorry, I'm seeing some wobbling about there on your screen. Is there a problem?
They're muted, Ruth, so they won't be able to, you won't be able to hear them.
Sorry, I don't want to carry on with the presentation if there is a problem at that end. It looks like we're having some emergency work done to the camera. Could somebody give me a thumbs up if you're now good to go? Okay, right. So, as I was saying, I was asked to make vestments for your church. And the request came, oh yes, we need all 4 colours. And I said, well, let's do one colour first and just see how we get on before we persevere and do the whole lot. So at the time of year, it was green that was the liturgical colour. So when you look at the 4 sets there, you'll see that they all have some Celtic design. And if you look closely, you'll see that they all have tartan. So why tartan? Why Celtic design? Well, partly that's because it's what I'm known for. But Celtic in particular, it's just a style which I feel is really quite timeless and elegant and works really well, more or less in any church setting, regardless of whether it's a modern church or an ancient church or anywhere in between. And as for tartan, I just love tartans. And I love the fact that you can get additional colours. You're not stuck with just the main liturgical colour and gold. You can have all sorts of little colours hinting their way through. So another reason for Celtic is that, sorry, I'm going to stop the share a minute and share it again. Because something has gone wrong with my slideshow. So let me try again. That's better. So throughout Angus, and in fact throughout the north and east of Scotland, we have there's wonderful collection of Pictish stones in different places. So this is our Christian history. Here, I'm at Aberlemno, and this is the kirkyard stone here, that some of you may well have visited. Just up the road, on the roadside, up until early this year, there was this magnificent stone with its beautiful angels either side of the cross. But unfortunately, before they'd taken it out of its protective box, which it always goes into for the winter, the said protective box worked loose and the whole thing blew down and the stone was damaged. So it's being conserved at the moment, but it's there. So just a little bit closer to home for you, I think, slightly, is Forfar and the Methven Institute. And there you have another collection of Pictish stones. And I'm going to use the terms Pictish and Celtic, roughly meaning the same thing. So you see what we tend to regard as Pictish, as Celtic knotwork. But you also see Pictish style figures, and here a beautiful angel in this one. Here, more key patterns. Down here, more key patterns, figures, this sort of thing. So that's at the Methven in Forfar. And then along the road in Arbroath, we have just outside Arbroath, St. Vigin's Museum. And here you'll see some more rather lovely Pictish stones. So these provide a sort of endless source of inspiration for me. So it was agreed right at the start that we would be going down the road of Celtic designs with some local inspiration. Also in Arbroath, in the visitor centre at the Abbey, I discovered this lovely stone effigy that's believed to represent St. Thomas Becket. And it's of a bishop wearing a beautiful embroidered chasuble, because obviously at that time they didn't have the capability of the fancy weaving of fabrics to make patterns in the fabrics so much. So all the decoration was embroidery. But you can see here, right down to the bottom of the stole, even the fringe detail, just how much detail was put into embroidered vestments. So embroidered vestments are nothing new. We've been doing it for centuries. So this is the green set that I made for you. And it's, you know, if you think back to that photograph there, the shape is really just the same. We've got a stole, we've got the chasuble. It's just a question of how I actually embroider it. So we decided for this one to use as the cross that would feature on the ends of the stole and in the centre of the chasuble, this lovely cross slab from Monyfeith, so just up the road from you. Nice knotwork, nice spirals, nice shape, and we felt that it fitted well with the style of thing that we wanted to do. And then there was the fabrics. And we decided to go with the Dundee Old tartan. Again, because it was local, and so something of significance to your area. And it's a lovely combination of greens and blacks and blues and golds and white, and enough green in it for it to work well on the green vestments. And the base fabric that we decided to use was this brocade, which goes by the name of Glastonbury brocade. And if you look, you'll see that there's a crown of thorns features within the design. And there's also a rose features within the design. And of course, the rose is a symbol often associated with the Virgin Mary. And you being St. Mary's Church, it was quite appropriate to have that. So the design was actually created in 1890. It's been on the go, you know, for all that time, and it's still a very popular design today. So I'm afraid my photography skills aren't great, and so I'm very much a point and shoot. So things come out the color that they come, and I can't do an awful lot about it. So it's the same fabric. It just, for some reason, looks bluer in this photograph. But this was the burse embroidered, but not actually made up into the burse. And if you look closely, you'll see that I've tried very much to center it on the design. So it's the same there, 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 and there. Balances out. And a burse is always square, so try to do that. If you look at the design, I'm not really going to give you time to follow this all round, but it is one single line with no beginning or end. And that's something that I always try to achieve with my work whenever I can. And here's the burse and veil set up on your altar. I think that's your altar rather than in my studio. And you can see I've got the tartan edging round there, and you'll see the tartan within the cross there. And here's a detail from the front of the chasuble. So you've got the cross, and there's knotwork that comes down from the cross, knotwork that goes out from the sides and a little bit above. As a way of framing the cross, we decided to use these spiral terminals within the knotwork. And that was done really to represent the fact that you are on the shore of the Firth of Tay. So that's the waves lapping on the shore. And that's the same piece, but spread out over my table. And you can see that I've got bits and pieces lying around. I'm afraid I'm quite a messy worker. Try to produce beautiful work, but in the process, I create chaos. So this is still waiting to have the neckline and shoulders cut out. And that's a piece of this for the stole. Again, not finished. Just to let you see what it's like. And there I've finished it. And in this particular one, I made fringes that used the colours within the tartan to create the fringes. And this was a photograph that your rector very kindly sent me once he'd received them. So that was their first use in your church. And now we come on to the purple set. So having got the green set made, it was really sort of knuckle down and get on with the purple set pretty much right away because it was needed for the start of Advent. So this time we decided that rather than looking locally for inspiration, we went right across to the other side of the country to the Isle of Iona, where there's the Abbey. That, of course, is not the original building, but St. Columba founded a monastery there back in the 6th century. And it's been an important religious site ever since. And there are many beautiful sculpted Celtic crosses on the island, and this one is the St. John cross. It's probably the most famous, but it is also very badly damaged, and here you see it mounted with bits of perspex for missing pieces and what have you. But back in 1970, they created this replica. Sorry, it's difficult to get good definition when you've got a bright sky behind you and you're looking towards it on a dark stone. But this replica was made in 1970, but it has been erected on the base of the original stone in exactly the location that it would have been when it was first put up, probably in the 8th century. There's also the St. Columba tartan, not an ancient tartan, This one was designed to commemorate the 1400th anniversary of the death of St. Columba. And St. Columba's Church on the Isle of Mull had commissioned Peter MacDonald to design the tartan, and they used the sale of the tartan and the products made with it as a way of fundraising to repair their church roof. But it's lovely colours that go with the colours of the Isle of Iona. And we're sticking with the same design of brocade, but this time in purple. So it's the same Glastonbury brocade. So that was the basis to start. The cross that you'll see here, this is the ends of the stole. There's a lot of detail on it. I obviously at this scale can't be totally accurate about it. It's really just giving you an interpretation of the cross. But we wanted for this set of vestments to keep everything quite simple. So we've got the cross, but the knotwork is quite plain, no frills and flounces. Here you can see a bit of it on the embroidery machine. I've always got to stitch a chasuble in at least 2 sections because the frame of the embroidery machine isn't big enough to take the whole of the embroidery in one go. So you'll see here where that sort of looks as though it's bending up. That's because that bit was embroidered first, and then I remounted the chasuble on the embroidery frame and did the surrounding bit for the arms of the cross orphreys and the top of the cross. Oh, sorry, this seems to be a rather blurry photograph, but that's the burse, veil and stole all side by side. And there's the whole lot laid out with the chasuble on my studio floor. And what I have to do to be able to photograph things like this is actually lay it on the floor and stand up on a step stool so that I can look down on it and not get too much distortion for the size. And then we come on to the red vestments. And I'm going to show you, at the end, I'm going to show you a video of these vestments being made, but I'll go through some of the details of them here. The first thing was to decide what we were going to use as the cross motif for the center of the chasuble and for the ends of the stole and for the burse and veil. Now, once upon a time in the dim and distant past, the cathedral for the Diocese of Brecon was in Brecon. That's why it's called the Diocese of Brecon. And in Brecon Cathedral, which was obviously built well before Reformation times, they had this lovely cross slab called the Old Bar Stone. I do somewhere have a photograph of it, but I took it in the days pre-digital cameras. So it's a print photograph and I can't find it anywhere. I did look for it. So this is just one from the Historic Scotland collection. I don't know what's happened to the stone now that the cathedral has been sold into private ownership. I don't know what happened to the stone. This was a drawing that was done of it back in the late 19th century, I think. They've not been very clever with the knotwork. They've just kind of given an impression of it. But it is showing the back of the stone, which is quite interesting because it's believed to be biblical scenes. And this bit in particular is David rending the lion's jaw. And we identify David because of the harp. So as I said, I'd taken photographs of it myself. And it was because I wanted to make a piece of work that was inspired by that cross. And I was doing it as a centerpiece for an exhibition back in 2003. I don't know if any of you remember a place called Pictavia. It's now a garden centre, but then it was very much set up to be a small museum that explored the Pictish history of the area. And this gives you an idea of scale, because this was me in the days before I had white hair and when I was a bit slimmer than I am now. But it lets you see it was a kind of life-size replica of the stone. So at the time that I was working on this, an author that I knew a little bit, because she was, as well as an author, she was the curator of Grome House Museum up here. She hypothesized that the square at the base of the cross represents the earth, and that the circle around the cross represents heaven, and that the knotwork on the cross is showing you the way of the cross, and that takes you from earth to heaven, assisted on your way with the saints depicted on either side of the cross. So I don't know how plausible that theory is. I don't know whether other academics would recognize it, but it's a nice story and it works quite well. So this time we decided not to use the Glastonbury brocade, but to use the Florence brocade. And the reason for that was that the Glastonbury brocade was actually a rather dull, kind of almost dusky pink colour rather than a nice red. And we wanted something that was very definitely red. And we wanted a red tartan. And we were doing a bit of research and I came across this lovely one, which is the red lichty tartan, which again comes from just up the road from you in Arbroath. So it was designed by the tartan artisan, and I managed to get in touch with him and got the story about it. And I thought this would be absolutely ideal for making these vestments, partly just because it was a beautiful tartan, but also because of the local connection. So, you know, it's all to do with the red light that was believed to have shone from the Lady Chapel, and that people in Arbroath knew. So I think I did send you the details about the tartan from the designer when I sent you the vestments, and that should be there. And if it's not, somebody can go and look for it. But that tells you all the story about it. But such a lovely tartan, and we felt that it would go really well with the red Florence brocade. And this is how it comes out when you see it against the brocade. Again, I have to apologize. Red is actually a very difficult color to photograph, but you see the tartan set within the knotwork, set within the cross. And do you remember that square at the base of the cross? I kind of played around with that and made the key patterns, which were rather jumbled in the original cross, got them so that they fitted into this space created by these terminals of the knotwork design. And you'll see here more little tongues of flame. And the idea with that was to have something that represented Pentecost, because that's one of the principal times that red is worn. You wear it you wear red for Palm Sunday, for Pentecost, and for the feast days of martyr saints. So it doesn't get very many outings. And at the time I was making this, I didn't rush, but I worked hard to get it finished in time for you to have for Palm Sunday. And this was it hanging on the mannequin with the lining in place, but nothing actually sealed down, no edges done, because I needed to check that everything was sitting properly before I finished it off. But that gives you a wee glimpse of my studio. And now we move on to the white vestments. So again, we dashed across to the other side of the country, back to the Isle of Iona. But this time we chose as our cross the St. Martin cross. So when I last visited Iona, it was in 2021, and I took this photograph of the east face of the cross. And as you can see, it was a rather dreich day, and there were little rivulets of rain running down, and it obscures the detail quite a lot. But there are biblical scenes. We've got, there's a couple of lions up there. This is Daniel in the lion's den, I think. I honestly can't remember what the other motifs were. But in fact, we decided to go with the west face of the cross, which is just made up entirely of kind of knotwork, snake, boss ornament. So all these bits are quite three-dimensional. They're coming out at you, which is obviously rather difficult to do for flat embroidery, but trying to give the impression of it. But also nearer to home, back in the St. Vigin's Museum, there was this lovely Pictish stone and this vine scroll motif that goes right up the side of the stone. And if you look, you'll see little trefoil type shapes. And that's quite a common motif. And so I wanted to go with that for designing the knotwork, because it's also interpreted as the tree of life or the true vine. And that seemed an appropriate thing to go with. And this time we decided to use the clergy tartan, partly because it's a blue tartan, and blue, of course, is the colour often used to represent St. Mary. So that was quite good. The clergy tartan's quite interesting because it's the only one of the ancient tartans that is occupation specific. So generally they were either clan tartans or district tartans. So the Dundee tartan, for example, is the district tartan. The Red Lichty tartan is a district tartan. But this was for the clergy. And since the vestments are worn by the clergy, going with the clergy tartan is quite an appropriate thing. We went back to using the Glastonbury brocade because a nice brocade that we liked the design of and we were happy with the colour of it. And here you see the front of the chasuble, and you'll see the little trefoil shapes, and you'll see how I've interpreted some of those boss ornaments that were on the main cross. And there's the back. And I know I didn't let you look at those very long, but I wonder if you can spot the difference between the front and the back. Because on all these chasubles, you have to have the front slightly shorter than the back. So we're not going to do a prize for spot the difference, but I'll just point them out to you. Up here, this triple spiral, sometimes called a triscale, that actually comes into the three little shamrock type leaves or clover leaves, so that they represent the Holy Trinity. It's often used as a symbol to explain the Holy Trinity, whether it's a clover leaf or a shamrock or whatever. The triple spiral also represents that. But if you look here, I've just made the arm a bit longer for the top there. But then I needed to make this bit longer too. So here, you've actually got an extra couple of trefoils just in there. So that's one of the ways that I use to get the the extra length, but still keep largely the same design. And there's the bursts, looking rather dark because of my camera limitations, and the veil. And in the bursts and veil, I decided to, rather than going with the little trefoil motifs of the main knotwork, I stuck with the little bosses from the cross just to work that. And again, this was a photograph I was kindly sent of its first use. So that concludes the main bit. But I want to stop now and share with you a short video that I've made about the process of actually making the vestments. So I work with industrial embroidery machines. First step is to cut out the bits of tartan that I need to make the motifs, get them pressed flat, and then onto my laser cutting machine. So here's the designs that are all going to be cut out, and here you see it all being cut. A very smoky, smelly process because it's basically burning through the wool of the tartan. So, and any of you who've singed your eyebrows or anything like that will know what the smell of burning wool is. It's fairly horrible. So that's going through that, and you can just faintly see the bits that have been cut. And in a moment, I'll lift the lid and let you see what's done. So that's what it looks like when it's been cut. And then I can just take away the excess fabric. And these are actually bits for the ends of the stole. And then the debris all has to be cleared up. Now, for the bigger bits that I need for the chasuble, I've actually got to cut in 2 pieces, because although my machine's quite big, it's not big enough to cut the entire length that I need in one go. So I actually have to cut out the first part and then cut out a piece on this pattern paper. And then I can lay the tartan down on top of it and match up where the cuts need to go. And there you'll see me trying to zoom in. Difficult to do it because I was holding the camera with one hand and sliding the fabric with another, but lining up to make sure that everything would be cut to get one big piece. And it's really quite critical to get that lined up as carefully as I possibly can. And then that gets cut. And I'm back at the computer screen again. And of course, the most time-consuming bit of all this was actually creating the designs in the first place. But here I'm just changing it so that it's a different fabric that's cutting, whether it's tartan or the pattern tissue that I was using. It's all quite, this bit's all quite technical. But the preparation for these things is really the important part. So it's getting it all done so that you're ready when you start embroidering for it all to go according to plan. So here I've got all the pieces all cut out, and what I do is I spread them out over the table to make sure that I've got all the bits that I need. And then I can start embroidering. And the first step, this is embroidering the stole. And here what it's doing is it's stitching an outline of where all the pieces are going to go. It can be a bit like watching paint dry, so I'm not going to bore you with this the whole way through. But basically, it's stitched out the design. I've laid the pieces on. They're stuck down with a temporary adhesive. And then the embroidery machine is set to do this little zigzag stitch over everything, just to hold everything in place before the embroidery proper starts. And now it's actually starting to embroider in some of the detail. In this case, the key pattern that goes round the ring of the cross. And this whole process to do the stole probably took about 3 hours. So the cutting out on the laser cutter, I probably spent a whole day doing that. Embroidering the stole probably took about 3 hours. Probably about 5 hours for the front of the chasuble, 5 hours for the back. But once it's embroidered, I make a point of looking at it carefully to make sure that everything's in place. So now I'm getting ready to do the chasuble. And of course, the fabric's too big for the machine. So you've got to make sure that you've pinned and clipped everything out of the way. Here you'll see the pieces that I've cut out, and I've sprayed with a temporary adhesive that then allows me to stick it in place. And the adhesive is just enough to hold it there while the first stitching is done. And I'm just going over it carefully, checking that everything is properly lined up before I set the machine to go. Because once it's embroidered, with machine embroidery, it is almost impossible to unpick. So here it's done the zigzag stitch all around. You can see the detail of that. And now it's stitching the satin stitch. And it makes such a difference once you actually put this extra layer of dense stitching on it. Of course, the thread runs out at inconvenient times and you have to change that. And then when it's all embroidered, or at least the first section, that was the shaft, what I had to do was position this on the machine again to do the rest of the embroidery. Again, the zigzag stitch and then the satin stitch. And then we come on to the work of actually making the pieces. So this is making the stole, making the seam at the neck, and then embroidering the cross onto the neck of the stole. And then the construction of the stole is all done by hand. And here I'm making the bias binding from the tartan to use to edge the chasuble. Quite a time-consuming process. I've stitched the lining and the main part together, stitched the bias binding in place, and now I'm hand stitching all around the inside to finish it off. And that is the end of my video. So that just gives you a very quick run through the process of how I do it. Now, I'm happy to take questions. Obviously, anybody that wants to ask me questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and fire away. Anybody that wants to ask anything or comment or tell me to go away, just
Ruth, I was wondering, when it was all that smoke, when you're cutting out, do you have to wear a mask?
no, it's actually the smoke was all contained within the machine, and there's an extractor fan with a vacuum, and it extracts it to outside. And they're not dangerous fumes, they're just smelly.
It's obviously such a lot of work. It's beautiful work.
It's taken me a long time to develop the processes to allow me to do that. You know, I've been kind of perfecting the technique for the last 30 years.
Thank you.
I would like to ask, how many mileage of stitches have you done in your career?
Well, I really no. There's only one piece that I've done where I actually measured and made careful note of the amount of thread that I used, but it was actually a very early set of vestments that I made for my husband, and it was a Latin style chasuble, and I worked out that I had actually used 7.5 kilometers of thread just for the gold thread for the embroidery. So it's an interesting question. How many have I done in my career? I think I could go several times around the world, maybe to the moon and back. Who knows?
Your work's beautiful.
Thank you very much. And I have to say, for those that don't know, this is Stevie Sim, and he's the person who designed your red lichty tartan. And it is beautiful. And I hope you're pleased with how I used it in those red vestments.
I feel honoured that my tartan that I designed for Arbroath as a district tartan has made its way into your work. It's just beautiful.
Thank you very much. So it was, certainly I was delighted to use it because it's such a lovely tartan, and I've kept a bit for myself.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, and it's nice that you noticed the rationale and how there's the red lamp from the St. Mary's Chapel in the design, and it's amazing when I did research on the origin of the red lichty story and how it goes so far back, over 500 years.
Yes.
To the old chapel that stood at the Arbroath Harbour, where I think it's the Harbour Master's office stands today. There was a chapel, it stood for about 110 years, I believe. And it was the origin point of the story of the red lichty.
Yeah.
And that's what's actually woven into the rationale of the tartan, which became an official district tartan for Arbroath. So
yes, so I did read that. Yes, and but it's such a beautiful tartan. But I felt it really enhanced the design that we had for the vestments. So
absolutely.
So anybody in the body of the kirk that's got a question?
I'm a red lichty.
You're a red lichty, are you?
Yes, and I didn't know the voice of chart until quite just. Can I just say, as an archaeologist in my professional life, I studied a lot of Celtic ecclesiastical material. I'm just enthused every Sunday when I'm here to look at your wonderful designs and remind me of the wonderful crosses that I've seen, in my archaeological life. Anyway, and I've actually dug on Iona on the site of the Abbey.
Oh,
anyway,
right. I hope I got my facts right then.
Yes, you did, yeah. But that's by the by. But as a question, I was interested, obviously, in the machine you have doing the stitching.
Yeah.
You have to set the pattern a bit like a jacquard loom. How does
that?
Yes,
it's basically I effectively draw the design onto the computer, and I literally draw it with a pen, but it's a graphics tablet pen onto a graphics tablet, and I have very clever software on my computer that will then interpret what I've drawn as stitches. So if I tell it that I'm going to stitch an outline, I will draw that outline and it will know that it's to be an outline. And then I tell it that I want to do an open zigzag stitch to cut things down, and it will create the line in that way. So it's a time-consuming process. I probably spent 3 times as long designing each set than I did actually creating each set of vestments for you.
Amazing, thank you.
Ruth, these sets of vestments are replacing vestments that have been serving well and falling apart. And I showed the congregation my stole that was given to me 18 years ago when I hit a ripe old age of 40, and it is still perfect. Even though you hate making fringe, the fringe is still perfect. The stole is wonderful. So if I die tomorrow, the congregation needs to know how long these vestments are good for.
Well, they should outlive me, but I don't plan on being around for too much longer. Who knows? You never can tell. But you know, fabrics wear out. That's a fact of life. One of the reasons why there is so little in the way of textile evidence in the archaeological record is because textiles don't keep. So unless you've had situations like them being buried in a bog for 12 centuries or something like that, as a general rule, textiles disintegrate. The materials that we've used will disintegrate less than some. You know, there's no silk in the vestments. Silk is notorious for disintegrating. It goes brittle over time and will fall apart. And most churches can look at sets of old vestments and see bits where the thread's worn, and you can see either the weft threads disappeared or the warp threads disappeared, and you've just got sort of lines of thread, particularly in areas of wear like shoulders and things like that. So the cotton and viscose that makes up the brocades that we used is actually going to last better than the silk would. And wool, of course, does last very well. So long as you don't let the moths get at it, it should be absolutely fine. And so all the tartans are pure wool. So yes, it should well outlast me. So I'm not going to come and repair it for you.
Oh, no. Well, I mean, my final question then, of course, is to both you and to Stevie, that if someone felt that they would like to contribute to altar frontals that might match our set, when I asked you originally a couple of years ago, when I finally tracked you down, I was like, wow, I found Ruth. I asked you if you could do another stole similar to mine in another color, and you said no because I don't keep all those patterns. But would we be able to get an altar frontal that would match our set in the future?
Well, I can't speak for the quantity of red lichty tartans still in stock, but
there is still stock.
There is still stock, right?
It's
So
secreted away at the moment, so
get a shifty on if you want a red matching one, but the other ones were all available from stock, so there shouldn't be any difficulty. Well, the St. Columba tartan, you can only get that through me because the designer actually gave me permission to get it woven. He had no more stock of it, and I said that I wanted some, and he allowed me to get it woven, and so I got one bale woven. When that bale is finished, I think it's extremely unlikely that it will be woven again. And I certainly, you know, the bale that I got woven, it was probably 6-7 years ago that I got it woven, and I'm about halfway through it. So when it's run out, that will be it. But I think it will last as long as my ability to actually continue making things, because I am now 71 and I might not carry on forever. Who knows?
Well, your skill is, your skill will be held for years, absolute years. Thank you so much.
I think the bolt of red lichty that was used, it must be, it could have been woven about 2012 or 2013. Certainly, I'd have to check my records, but it's over 10 years old, that bolt.
Mm-hmm.
Been hiding in a spot that I forgot.
It's not a huge amount that's actually needed. in the way that I use it, because it is just for the applique within the design.
There would be cloth available if it was required in the red
So,
lichty.
so I mean, probably we're talking about buying another meter if you wanted
there would
an
be
alto frontal, maybe a meter and a half if you wanted a matching pulpit fall. Who knows?
Thank you. Christine has a question for you.
Are you self-taught? You sound as though you are, and there's a lot of computer technology involved, which obviously wasn't around when you were young when you started all this. So have you had to learn all this modern way of work?
Yes, I mean, when I first started doing Celtic designs, which was about 35 years ago, when I first developed my interest in that, I worked with a scalpel and a cutting mat. That was a very slow, laborious process, and certainly not really commercially viable, but it was enough to get me to the stage where people liked my work and my work began to be recognized, and people to say, oh, that's a nice style. And at that point, I felt able to go to the bank and say, please, can I have enough money to buy a new car, but spend it on a laser cutting machine instead?
Christine has a follow-up question.
And so are you teaching anybody how to do this, or will the next person who wants to do this also be kind of self-taught? Is there any, I go to sometimes lectures and you hear about all those skills that have been used to renovate old machines.
At the moment, I on and off teaching not the embroidery skills at the moment, but on and off the sewing skills to a monk at Plascardon Abbey. And he's just 25, 26, something like that, you know. So he's, if I can get him trained well enough, he will develop the skills. He's got the ability, he's got the enthusiasm. What he doesn't really have is the support of his community to take time off from the normal monastic duties. They give him time off to come to me to have a lesson from time to time, but they don't give him time in his normal daily routine to sit and practice. And practice is the name of the game for learning this. But I have a retirement project in mind, and I might write a book. Who knows?
Anyone else have a question? Anyone have a question for Steve? Oh, where is your shop? Helen asked.
Sorry, could you say that again? The sound broke a bit.
Is your shop?
Where is your shop for your materials?
Well, I actually work at home. I do have a shop. My late mother had a shop in Arbroath in Lordburn. Sheena Christie, she was a well-known artist. And the shop is used mostly for storage. I keep materials there, and there's loads of kilts and busts and mannequins in there. But it's not trading as such, it's more for storage. But it's in Lordburn in Arbroath, and it is open by appointment. It's not publicly open yet. I do hope to open it again. Yeah, since my mother passed years ago, I just couldn't bear to let go of her shop. So it's now where I store materials. So it's in Lordburn, Arbroath, and people can reach me on social media, well, on my website through the tartanartisan.com. That's where I am. People can reach out to me there. So if I can meet people and show them fabrics in Arbroath by appointment.
And Ruth is just outside of Inverness, but you don't have your studio anymore, do you? I mean, the girls that used to work for you or work with you, That doesn't happen anymore?
I still have the studio, and I still work there, and I still have a little shop as part of it, but it's very much a workshop which has a little retail area that's used as a shop, rather than a shop in which I do a little bit of work. You know, so the emphasis is that it's my workshop. And again, you know, if you're up in the area and want to come and see me, you really do have to make an appointment, because that's the only way that I'll guarantee to be there. Because one of the advantages of being old is that I can kind of suit myself about when I come and go. And if I wake up one morning and think, oh, it's a lovely day, I want to go out for a jaunt over to the West Coast, I might just do that. Or I might go swimming and not come in until later on in the day. So if you want to come and see me, make an appointment. If you just happen to be passing and think, oh, that's her shop there, if the door's open, you're welcome to come in.
And is Enza going to be ordained with something that you made?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Will Enza be ordained with something that you made?
Yes, she is. Yes.
Do you want to see it?
Oh, we'd
Got
love
it
to see
there. Hold on.
Sorry.
I confess to Ruth that I'm so old that, I mean, I didn't have Ruth life when I was ordained. So it came from Newcastle upon Tyne, my stole. My stole. I wish I had learned Ruth back then, but. Oh, here it comes. Ooh.
Can you see?
We're a bit out of focus, Enza. I think you'll have to, hold it in front of your face, because that's better.
Wow.
No, in front of your face, because that,
Wow.
yeah.
That's beautiful.
Well, that I'm going to go into competition with Stephen here. That's my tartan that I
Yes.
designed.
Oh,
Highland
lovely.
celebration.
And what is the tartan?
It's a Highland celebration, and it
Very nice. Oh,
there's a story attached to it. I've designed another one that's called Hebridean celebration, but it was only woven in Harris tweed because it came from the Outer Hebrides. And both of them kind of relate to basically the clans of the areas that they cover, and using elements from them and having a bit of a story about it. So, but I'm not really going into competition with you. They were just ones that I happened to want for my specific things.
I'm actually looking at your Hebridean celebration right now on the Scottish Register of Tartans, and oh, it's beautiful. It's got a psalter in there, I'm sure. Is that your inspiration?
Yes, that's part of it, yes.
Oh, very nice.
And you'll see the Highland celebration also has a psalter in it.
Good. That was one of my inspirations when I did my declaration for Broth tartan, which was the line rampant and the saltire, but it's beautiful.
Thank you. It's not an area that I would like to spend much time on. I found it quite hard work, but the Highland celebration one in particular, I designed specifically because I wanted to have a tartan that I could call on that would go with all the liturgical colours.
Yeah, yeah.
So I wanted to be able to use it on green, white, red, purple, and also occasionally on rose and possibly on black as the other colours, and on gold as well, and for it to look good on all of them. So
it looks like a real tartan.
Well, that's
lovely.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because there are tartans. I mean, for those of you who don't know, tartans are actually being registered every week. You'll get maybe anything from 3 or 4 to 14, 15 tartans, depending on how busy somebody's been, that are being registered every week. And they'll be for things like the New York Fire Brigade or the Queensland Outback Troops or what, you know, I'm just saying that, making that one up. But, you know, there are an awful lot there. There's something like, is it 14,000 different registered tartans? Something
there's
of
a
that
lot.
order. And a lot of them have never been woven. You know, a lot of them have been designed, but maybe only used in print form.
Mm.
They've never actually been woven. And some of them, like my Highland celebration, that was one bale that I had woven. I'm halfway through that bale. It will see me out. It's unlikely to ever be woven again. I might give permission for it to be woven to the weavers. It was Prickly Thistle just north of me that wove it, and they did a very nice job of it. I was very happy with the weave, and if she said, oh, she would like to carry on once I've retired, then I would probably happily hand it over to her to do if she wanted. But no, it's a tartan design. It's not just one of these things that anybody can do. And hats off to Stephen, because he does a beautiful job with all his. So
I still need to weave a lot of my fabrics. I've used numerous mills, but it is a challenge to
yeah,
weave fabric, to realize it. It's not an inexpensive operation to invest in cloth, and it's quite time consuming.
yes. I mean, you're talking, you know, never mind the design. You're talking sort of £2,000 or £3,000 easily to have a bale of tartan woven.
That's right. Yeah, and I
You
think
know, so you can make an awful lot of stuff with the 60 meters of tartan that comes on a bale of cloth.
Mm.
So you've got to know that you can use it.
Well, that's funny you should say that. I mean, I'm just mindful of the time, and you're both very, very gracious. But my middle name is Buchanan. And we've just had our first clan chief in 300 years. And some of you might have seen the BBC special on the Buchanan clan and their work to try to find the chief genetically, because you know the clearances, and they were Jacobites, and they all went to the North America and far afield and so on. But if you see the show on the BBC iPlayer, you'll see that the family had to create a new Buchanan tartan for the special occasion. And they asked the teenage daughter to choose, and she chose pink. And it's such a special tartan, only that family, ruling the clan leader, can wear it. And you're saying it takes £2,000 to make a bale, and only 5 people can wear this thing.
Yep.
And I mean, it's pink, so I don't want to wear it anyway. So I'm happy with the antique or the hunting. But honestly, £2,000 for 5 people to wear a tartan. Because only the royal, whatever they're called, the ruling family of the Buchanan, the chief and his family can wear this particular pink Buchanan tartan. Looks horrible. Anyway, I'm just mindful of the time. Is there any other final questions?
What I would like to have said was the red lichty tartan, as well as having the symbol of the red licht of St Mary's Chapel, in the fine detailing in the gold, there's actually 5 threads that cross over to create the symbol of a portcullis.
Oh,
and
wow.
that emblem of the portcullis is of the great portcullis of the Arbroath Abbey. So here in Arbroath, we obviously have the big monastery, Arbroath Abbey, and when I was inspired to create the red lichty, that was another great symbol that I managed to capture within the set. So there's in the geometry, there's this detail that I noticed has been captured in the vestment garment. And so not only is the red licht of St Mary's Chapel, but there's also the great gate of the Arbroath Abbey, which obviously has a great history here in Arbroath, and the legacy of Scotland. It's quite a story to tell in that tartan. And I feel honoured that it's been captured in such a beautiful garment by Ruth.
Thank you for that.
Well,
Yeah.
and Pat is sitting here. She's the lady from Arbroath, and she was just saying that it was also a symbol of her high school.
High school, our high school.
Oh, that's my school as well. Yes,
That's his school as well.
Right.
same school.
No,
I
that's
taught at the
very
high school.
good.
Did you? Yes.
Well-
That was all time. I've got some of the high school magazines.
Oh,
Good.
Right.
So anyway, thank you very much for inviting me to give this little presentation today. I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something. Now, I believe the vestments are all set out there. I got a quick glimpse of them earlier when we had the little accident with the camera. You know, I hope you can go and have a close look at them and see the detail, and that's perhaps some of it makes a bit more sense now, some of the thinking behind the designs. But thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. And we're going to have, at the very end of this, I was going to consecrate them, as it were, or to ask God to bless them, because we haven't done that formally. And now that we've had all four here, I was going to say a wee prayer, but I mean, you don't have to stay if you don't want to, if it's not really your-
No, if you're going to do that now, you just carry on. That would be good.
But Stevie, if you don't want to, you know, you're welcome to stay and,
No, I'm happy to stay.
right? And so let us pray. Almighty and eternal God, who commanded through Moses, your servant, that sacred vestments of high priests and Levites should be consecrated for the proper performance of their ministry before you, and for the honor and glory of your name. Come, we pray, at our call, and refresh us with your grace. Pour forth your blessing that these vestments may be sanctified and consecrated for your fit worship in the sacred mysteries. May bishops, priests, deacons, thus vested, be protected from wandering thoughts or temptations from the evil one, to the fitting and proper performance of your worship, and to their own perseverance in your service. And we ask all this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
amen.
Well, thank you very much for your perseverance.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
And yeah.
Thank you, Ruth.
Well, thank you all for joining me this evening. And if you want those altar frontals, just
Keep me updated on your work, Ruth. And keep in touch.
thank you very much.
But before Patricia wanted to say something to Stevie, sorry.
Under the portcullis was also known as pajamas, but as children we just called it Auntie Nora's pajamas.
That's nice. That's nice.
Well, the invitation is extended to both of you, of course. If you ever want to come back to St. Mary's, or Steve, you're only up the road, but if you ever want to see the garments, by all means, come and, you know, you may have to make an appointment with me, but you're welcome to come and see them in person.
I would like to do that. Yeah,
By all
make a
means.
plan. I'll arrange something.
Absolutely. You know, you can make a day of it. It's only down the road. Well, thank you all very, very much.
Thank you. And we did record this meeting. I'm going to stop the recording now. And if it's all worked, I will send the link and you can do what you will with it. Okay? Thank you very much for joining me. Good night,
Thank-
everybody.
Good night. Good night. Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.